Dr. Faisal, I want to say you're one of the most passionate people I know about love and relationships and marriage. You're just all about it. I mean, since the pandemic, you've prayed for hundreds of people to find their spouse and get married. And you've had, from what I understand, 90% success rate that people have found someone, got engaged, got married. And, this makes you the happiest person I know. Now, how come you're so passionate about marriage?
Well, passion really comes from understanding God's vision for relationships. Remember, He's the true visionary and author of love. He's the one who designed it. He writes the love stories, and His scripts are always unique for every person. And so that passion, when you get a hold of God's vision and heart for relationship, what happens is it stirs up passion. In fact, vision always ignites passion in our lives. And that's kind of how it really goes. And before you know it, you start seeing results. And when you begin to see people find happiness in relationships, it does something. It gives us hope in a world today where we don't really see that happening as often, right?
That's
our
right.
culture and our world when it comes to relationships and marriage is doom and gloom. And should we even go about it? There's so many things that don't seem to be working.
Exactly. I mean, I was reading some of the statistics. They say 20% of people under 40, they're not even interested in getting married. It's not, they just say, well, I don't even want to do that anymore. And 2 in 5 of those under 40, they're saying marriage is an outdated institution. You don't even need marriage to have a relationship, because marriage and relationships, people are like, oh, I want to be in a relationship. But really, in today, it's a sexualized culture. So it's all about just hooking up, being with these different ones, and then maybe going on a few dates. But there's nothing that really has substance from what I understand.
And you're right, Bev. It's like the real needs are not being met. Because relationships are supposed to be very deep. They're not just physical, they're emotional, they're intellectual. There's a part of their ability to have intimacy and connection, even on a spiritual level, is not being met.
Wow. I mean, when you say that, I think a lot of people are saying, wow, I don't even know if I have a relationship like that. Because most relationships are about, well, we hang out together, we have fun together, we have great sex, we split the bills, it's good to live together for these financial reasons. But what you're talking about seems to be something much more than what we see as relationship and even love relationships.
Yeah, because it's like going back to God's original intent and vision when it comes to relationships. That's where this is all coming from. Okay. And once you understand the vision and the purpose behind something, you're better able to become self-aware and conscious of what the goal is and what you should be looking for. What are some red flags that you should be concerned about? And what are some things you might need to adjust in you to be able to step into a relationship that would be fulfilling? So understanding that our number one area of need of all of us is connection. Mm-hmm. We long for deep connection at every level. And anything that's ever gone wrong in our history started with our psychology as children, where as young children, we lost connection. So in other words, we were conceived out of intimate connection. Mm-hmm. And then we were intimately connected in our mother's womb through the umbilical cord to our moms. Yep. That's connection. And then once we're born, there's a connection in the process of how we come into this world. And then if you're nursed, or fortunate enough to be nursed, I would say, there's an intimate connection and bonding that takes place. And in fact, if a baby statistically is not held for 2 weeks straight, the baby will die. Wow. So we need connection to live, to be birthed, and to grow. And so this connection continues, but in the first 7 years of a child's life, that's the time in which one's connection is lost, or there's a disconnect, or something goes wrong, or trauma sets in. That's where we start to lose the concept of connection, but we never lose the desire or the hunger or the need.
Because, as you're talking, I'm just thinking so many people, we always have this hunger for connection. I mean, that's why you see people out there all the time. They're on dating apps. They're looking to connect because there's something inside of us that says, hey, I don't want to be alone. I want to be with someone. But it just seems like we can't connect properly anymore. It seems like the thing we long for and go after, we don't even really find. And then sometimes even in marriage, we get married thinking this is the thing. And then, most marriages statistically last 7 years, and then people get divorced.
Yeah, and not only that, Bev, before they even get to the marriage stage, according to our world and culture today, they may date several people, sleep with many different people with hookup culture, then they might date some people, then they get into some relationships and then break up a few times, re-emphasizing the pain and the negative aspects of disconnection, and then they might live together, some of them with people, and we know today that 1 in 5 couples that live together end up getting married. And then 1 in 2 of them get divorced. And so at the end of the day, if you look at the statistics of this whole process, it's not working. The system is broken. And that's why people are unhappy and they're giving up on the idea of marriage.
Wow.
And they're like, well, what's the point of it? And, so from their point of view, it probably makes a lot of sense because they're like, where's the results? And this is working whether people know God, have a relationship with God or not. It doesn't matter anymore. The statistics are the same. Everyone is struggling with the same problems and they're wondering what the reason is. And that's, I think, our big issue today.
It is, because like you said, we all want relationship and it's just a mess. When as you're talking now, I'm thinking, oh my, it is a mess on all sides. We're just not getting it right. Yeah. But you're saying that God has a vision. I love what you said, that he's the author of relationships.
Yes.
And God actually has a vision for relationships and particularly marriage relationships.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about this vision of God's?
Well, let's go back to the first couple of creation, the first lady and the first man. So God makes Adam. Mm-hmm. He makes him out of the dirt and he breathes life in him. And I bring that up because you look at man, when God makes him and forms him out of dirt, he breathes life. So the first experience that man has is the breath and the presence of God, which is the number one necessity of a man. Okay. He must breathe in the presence of God, have an awareness of God's presence for himself. Now, there's no woman around. There's this man. He breathes the presence, and the God sets him into a garden and gives him responsibility and says, so that's the second thing. A man must know the presence of God. Then it's necessary for a man to come into an awareness of responsibility. So God gives him responsibility over all that he created. Mm-hmm. And then God gives him his word. So a man must know the word of God. And so these are some things that have to happen before. And God wants the man to be alone first before he presents a woman to him for the first marriage of creation.
So so this is the story from the book of Genesis in the Bible, and you're talking about when Adam was in the garden. But as you're talking, we can see these parallels, just with a man on earth, that he needs to know God, you're saying.
Yes.
First of all, to know God and to experience that breath of God. Wow, I'm loving what you're saying there.
Well, what God's trying to do is create a capacity in men for relationships. And oftentimes our culture tells us men, they don't understand relationships that well. But the reality is a man is designed to understand and love in a relationship in a way that a woman can respond to love. Because nowhere really in the New Testament, in Scripture, does it say for a woman to love her husband. Mm-hmm. But it does say for a man to love her. And it doesn't mean she doesn't love her. It means the love she loves with is a responsive love, which is the same love that this man experienced from the presence in his relationship with God, which then he passes on to this woman, which in that love she responds and blossoms and blooms into something she never was before. And she responds with that love back to him and then goes back to God. It's like a circle that never ends and keeps going. That's why the relationship should get better. The love is supposed to get stronger. So the vision is not for momentary excitement in the beginning of the relationship, but the longer you're in it, the more intimate, more sweet, more connected, and more powerful it becomes, which gives you incentive for the relationship to keep going, to keep it going.
Wow.
Because it's more valuable as time goes on. It doesn't lose value, it gains value.
Wow.
Now that's a whole different perspective.
That is a whole different perspective, I'm telling you. And what you said, it's like, for the man loves the woman, but actually he needs God. He needs to have that relationship with God even to create that capacity to love.
Because he becomes a recipient. So God wanted Adam to understand love outside of the woman first as a recipient. So God began to show him care, show him presence, entrust him with what he had built and what he had created and put it in his hands and said, Adam, listen, I've given you responsibility, I've given you authority, and I've given you some instructions. And what I want you to do is you name the animals because I've given you jurisdiction over everything I create. Yeah. So God didn't name the animals, he could have, and he started making these animals and says, Adam, what do you want to call it? And Adam had the ability to, by revelation, understand what the nature of the animal was. And whatever he named it was found in the name. So Adam was really good at this.
Yeah.
So he could see things in a really clear and precise way and understand them. But he was also a recipient of the presence and the love of God. So because he was on the receiving mode, God was instinctively teaching man, this is how you receive love and this is what it will do to you. It will awaken you to your potential. It will awaken to you what I've placed in you, your gifts, your assignment, the nature of what I put in you, your authority, all that's going to come to the surface. I'm teaching you this so that one day you'll understand this intimate relationship with a spouse that's coming, but he doesn't know about this yet.
Yeah, wow. So what you're saying is God prepares a man actually to have a wife.
Yes.
I want to tell you, ladies, that's why you want a man who knows God, because God's done some work on him.
Well, you know what I'm saying? I think we've got it all mixed up here because, we're trying to, find any man. In today's culture, the man, when it comes to getting a woman, he's like a dog, tracing around looking for the right woman, and he's marking his territory everywhere he goes. But this is a different concept.
Wow.
This is a man he's being built up in his relationship with God. So if someone is out there today and they're single and they're saying, hey, what should I be doing? Well, the first thing you need to be doing is getting to know the presence of God. Wow. Getting into an environment where God's presence is becoming real and you begin to live by his presence. Mm-hmm. You become aware of his presence and conscious to the place that if it's not there, you notice it. Mm-hmm. And you also now are aware of your responsibility. And in your relationship, you're understanding relationship and love and communication. And what this will do is cause your identity to come to the surface. Who you really are will begin to emerge. So you become a real man, in other words.
Wow.
And when you become a real man, you become a unique man. When you become a unique man, you become a confident man because you're not a copy of someone else. Wow. And that's what women actually like. They're attracted to a confident man.
We want
a humble, confident,
exactly.
a humble, confident man, not an arrogant man.
Yeah.
But that confidence comes by becoming aware of who you actually are. But you can't become aware of who you are till you recognize who you belong to. Wow. And when you come into that relationship with God, you're the divine, the creator of heaven and earth. When he gets to reveal to you your uniqueness and who you are as a man, you begin to blossom. So here we go into Adam's story. He's in the garden. He's got responsibility. Yeah. He's literally has an amazing relationship with God. He's walking with him in the garden. Yeah. Imagine going for a walk with God.
I know, being able to talk to God and must be cool.
And he's aware of God, not only with his spirit, but his soul, his emotions, his intellect. He can see 24 hours a day. He can see into the realm of the spirit. That's what's happening to him. There's no sin. It's purity. Yeah. There's innocence. There's beauty in this whole relationship. And then God turns around and he says something in Genesis 2:18. He says, not good for man to be alone. Now, you see, some men ought to be left alone. I mean, you can't even leave him in the room alone with a Barbie doll. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, you know what I'm saying? There's some men just
Yeah, you got to leave them alone because God has not worked with them
God's
yet.
like, look, this man, you ought to be leave alone. Just stay away from this kind of man. But there's a certain kind of man that God says, no, I want you in a relationship because I want to bring our relationship to the next level. And you'll never understand that until you get into a relationship because you know how to receive love and give love to me, but you don't know what it's like to give love to someone.
Wow.
And so what God was really teaching man is that I'm the head, you're the body.
Okay.
But one day I want to give you a body, so as the head you can give love and receive love, which is a different experience that you cannot have with me. Wow. And I want you to have it one day so you can understand love in the way it's intended to be. And so here's this man, and God says...
This is just so much deeper than we just think, a guy's going to go out, he's looking for a good-looking girl, someone he can, be around, look after, be the mother of their children. That's such a kind of, in one sense, feels superficial to what you're talking about. Yeah. This is really deep connection you're talking about.
And something actually went wrong in the garden, which we'll talk about at some point, but what went wrong is the byproduct of what we have today in our culture. All these relationship problems between men and women go back to what actually happened in the garden. So there was a vision that was communicated. There was a vision that was experienced for a little while, but something went wrong. And it was deliberately intended to go wrong so that we could have the culture
before we get
today.
into that, I want to hear more about the good stuff here, about how it's meant to be before we get into what's gone wrong. So here's this man, and he's been in this relationship with God. He's taking up these responsibilities, walking in the garden, working in the garden, and God says it's not good for this man to be alone.
That's right.
So now what happens?
So now what God does is he says to the man, I'm going to put you into a state of sleep. In other words, rest.
Okay.
In other words, before God brings your wife to you, men, he's going to put you into a state of rest in your life. He has to put you in a state of peace, that you're at peace with God at that moment. You're not desperate. You're not thirsty, as you would say.
That's what I'm saying. It's not like don't do anything and watch video games. It's kind of like you go into peace about you're not running after, pursuing, looking everywhere for someone.
Yeah, and that comes from, there's a powerful statement that's made by the scholars in the Bible, and it says that he that finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains the favor of the Lord. But the word find is not to go searching for everywhere. The word find in Hebrew is that when she is presented to you and appears before you, you will suddenly recognize who she is, that she's the one.
That's powerful.
That's different than going searching for her on every app or swiping left or right and everything you can do. Yeah. That's not what God's saying. So in Adam's case, this is the perfect model. So now Adam has been put into a place of rest. Now comes the time to make a woman for him, a helpmate, suitable for him, because he doesn't have anybody he can relate to. And so God takes a piece out of the side of Adam and creates a woman out of it. Very different than the way he made man. Okay. Both are created in the image of God, but something was in woman. God didn't just make her from the dust of the ground like he made Adam.
Okay.
That's different now.
Yeah.
Because he could have done that. And sometimes we just instinctively think that's what happened. God made man, God made woman, here we go, boom. No. He made them in the image of God. He breathed life into both of them. So they're equal in that sense. But what he did was, for the woman, he took a piece of man and made her out of man. So there's something in the woman that's of man, and there's something in man that the woman recognizes. So there would be a genuine draw one to another. There would be something about one another that would draw them in a way that nothing else would draw them one to another. Wow. And so then Adam wakes up, and God comes and presents this woman to him. Now remember, Adam had been naming all the animals when God presented them.
Yeah.
So now he goes, wow, this is like bone of my bone. He's able to recognize and see, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. God didn't tell him what he did, but he knew by revelation.
Okay.
This is different species now.
He recognized her.
He recognized her immediately, and he said, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. And he said, oh, I shall call you woman, which means you're of man.
Okay.
So he recognized, and what's interesting about Adam was, at this level of connection, he doesn't just see her physical body and recognizes there's something different, but he sees into her soul. He understands her feelings. He feels her feelings. This is big now, because women are like, this is not possible.
I was going to say, that is not, they do not understand how we think.
Okay, or feel, right? So Adam here is able to feel her feelings in the moment she feels them.
Wow.
Okay, because this is what God's original vision is.
That place of, because they were that connected?
They were that connected. And that's God's vision. However, we don't see that in our culture. We always say a man can never understand a woman. A man can't feel that well.
Yeah, we say, men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Exactly.
We're so different.
But in this case, God's saying, no, if you have access to my vision and my nature, you can actually look into the heart of the woman and understand where she's coming from. And you can go ahead and understand her feelings, but you can also understand her way of thinking and be attracted to that side of her that's uniquely different than you. Because a woman's brain is scientifically different than a man's brain. But there's something in there that draws you in. So it's not like a chore. To try to understand and listen what your wife is talking about, or you're in that relationship, but it's actually a draw and a joy for a man to be able to understand her.
And is this what it means in the Bible where it says that they were naked and unashamed?
Yes.
Is that?
Yeah, so this is the very next thing. So the next thing God says in Genesis 2:25, I think it is, he says that they were naked and unashamed, meaning they were spiritually naked and vulnerable, transparent.
So they could see in a sense, see each other's spirits?
They could. They could interact with each other's spirit, because this relationship was triune to begin with.
Okay.
And God says they were naked and unashamed, and it says this is what explains why they have to leave mother and father and be joined and united into one: spirit, soul, and body.
Okay.
So when we think about sex and intimacy, we think of it as a physical act.
Yeah.
But when God looks at it, he looks at it and says, in my vision, it is a human spirit that has the faculties of a soul, mind, will, emotions, imagination, intellect, becoming one through a body with another human spirit that has a soul that lives in a body, all in the context of they're also a temple of the Holy Spirit, or if you're with God, the Spirit of God.
Yeah.
So you're also a temple. So that's another big deal. We'll get onto that one other day. But here's the point. It is a union like no other. And in doing so, God wants man to experience what it's like to give your love to someone, because you're a recipient of the presence, a recipient of love, and now you offer this love, and she responds to this love in a unique way, and then this love continues to grow between each other. So Adam and Eve had it right from the beginning. So this is the first couple of creation, and God gives his vision and says, a man shall leave mother and father, and cleave or become united in one with his wife. That's the vision statement for marriage.
Yeah.
God gives it right off the bat.
Wow.
And
so it actually is, about coming into this place of connection that God intends for us to have with this love, as you're describing it. He's giving love, she's receiving it, giving him back. And so it's growing all the time. And there's a fullness in this relationship that he actually intends. It's not just for, as some people say, just for having children or just for creating a family. God actually is looking for this union.
Yeah, and in fact, it's interesting you brought up the children fact, because when you look at God's original vision, the woman was named woman, which the emphasis was of man, and how they were uniquely one flesh, one bone. They were the same.
Yeah.
That was the emphasis prior to sin, prior to the fall.
Yeah.
The moment the fall occurs and sin enters into the picture, the next step is she gets a different name. Okay. And she's been called Eve, the mother of all living. So what originally God wanted the focus to be for man was the woman.
Wow. I've never seen that.
So what happened was the woman was supposed to be number one. But now the woman has become, maybe she's a mother. And then that's even criticized in today's day and age. But in reality, the woman lost a sense of who she is, and people tried to make her identity as into a mother.
Okay.
Or a career woman, right? So this battle's going on in our culture.
Something other than being,
just a woman.
Just a woman.
God's saying, you're, as a woman, you're more than enough. As a woman, you're all you ever need to be. And as a woman, everything will come out of you. Because a woman is such a unique creature that if you give her a seed, she can blossom and make it a person. You give her a house, she'll make it a home, right?
Wow.
You give her anything, she'll cultivate it. And as a man, your responsibility is to cultivate that which is placed in the woman. In fact, in God's vision, he says that the man is the glory of Christ.
Yes.
The glory of God, in other words.
Yeah.
So God the Father is the head, Jesus is the body. Jesus is the head, man is the body.
Yeah.
But he says, as man is the glory of Christ, so is the woman the glory of man. What does that mean? That means that a man, when he loves a woman, she will blossom into the brightest expression of the goodness and the glory and the presence of God through that man's love. She'll become all she was originally intended to become. She will blossom, she will bloom, and she will grow and become something. She'll become the best version of herself just by experiencing this relationship and this love from a man that truly loves her this way.
Wow.
So this means that when a woman experiences it, she becomes the ultimate expression of the man. The brightness. So you can tell how good the man is about how happy and joyful and full of life the wife is, you see.
You're saying some stuff here. I just want to tell you, I think that might be quite what's the word? It could stir up some emotions in some people, because that goes against the narrative of the world.
Well, because God's vision was noble and it was meant to be in a certain context. Mm-hmm. And so we're not trying to take away from women. We're trying to empower women. God wanted to empower the woman.
Yeah.
And he wanted them to have this connection. And then from that connection, birth other things. Mm-hmm. So a woman can be amazing in a vocation, in a career. And statistically, women can do most jobs better than men because they have a multitasking brain. Mm-hmm. Men can only focus on one thing at a time. And that's also a strength of a man. Yeah. So when the man saw the woman for the first time, he could only focus on one thing. So he gave her all his attention. Okay. When he looked into her eyes, he saw into her eyes, into her soul. When he felt his feelings, he felt only her feelings. When he understood her thoughts, he really understood her thoughts. And when he saw her physically, he really looked at her. So he was able to focus on only one thing at a time. So once he focused on the woman, it's like the garden that he was in went blur on him. Everything around him began to fade. And even today, when a man really falls in love for a woman, it's kind of like what happens. Everything goes in the background and she begins to stand out to him. Something happens on a very deep level. And that's how God made man. And so a woman can multitask. A woman is able to do things a little differently and has a different way of thinking even and feeling about things. Mm-hmm. But once we understand that connection is important, even to men, men desire intimacy. The number one need of a man is not sex. Mm-hmm. The number one need of a man is intimate connection.
Wow. Okay.
Then honor. And number three is sex. And so if we don't get the intimate connection and we don't get the honor, then the sex is not going to be that great.
Okay.
And that's why you'll notice men go into affairs where they're honored. So maybe they're not honored at home and they're honored at work.
Okay.
Right? And all these scenarios come in because there's honor and respect, which is what happens to a man. He responds to honor. Okay. There's something about that in the nature of man. And so as a woman honors the man, and as the man loves the woman, this cycle of love and honor continues between them. Not that a man doesn't honor the woman. Truthfully, his respect is always equal to his love for a woman. Okay. But in reality, this entire vision is based in a context of having a relationship with God. And obviously something went wrong with the whole
But I just want to say that this is what, as you're describing this vision, man and woman become their best version.
Yes.
And when you put them together, they're an even better version of themselves when you actually put them together. And that's God's vision and the way he intends, not only for them to have this great relationship, but out of that place of the relationship, they become the best of themselves.
Absolutely.
Which is so counterintuitive to what the world says, where it wants to teach us, you don't need a man or you don't need a woman. You can be the best on your own, that individualized thing for us. So you're kind of blowing up a whole lot of things here.
And whatever version you can be on your own, and it's healthy to grow and mature, and that's all wonderful.
Yeah.
You're going to be a better version with someone who loves you and understands you and respects you, because you have this deep, intimate need of connection. It's never going to go away.
Yeah.
And you'll find other ways to satisfy this need by having quote unquote junk food.
Yeah.
You'll have habits that you'll pick up. You'll try to pick up things and you won't understand your life. It's like a disjointed life.
Yes.
In one compartment, you do this one thing to satisfy a need that you can't quite define, but you're unhappy and it creates more problems for you. But if you come at this and are willing to invest in this thing, some incredible things can happen. And God's vision is all behind it. It's always been there.
Yeah.
And we really need to maybe
But
pay
I do
attention
want to just touch on this, because you said something went wrong.
Yes.
I mean, we know that. I mean, this beautiful picture you just painted, that's not what it looks like right now. And, we may, why don't you just, begin to talk about that to us?
Well, what happens when we focus on the fall of man, we miss this thing we're about to talk about right now.
Okay.
And what we miss out on is that when the serpent entered the garden and Satan bore the body of the serpent, obviously, his plan was to do something to destroy the first marriage.
Okay.
And we don't even think that way.
Yeah.
But what did he do? He pulled the woman aside.
Yeah.
And it says the woman was deceived. He deceived her. He didn't pull the man aside. Now, mind you, the man should have been guarding the garden like he was supposed to.
Okay.
So he was kind of slacking on his responsibility. But Satan knew to pull the woman aside and use some of her strengths and use them against her. And he lied to her. Because remember, the woman never heard God say, don't eat of the tree. God only spoke that to the man.
Okay.
Because God's intention is a man is supposed to lead spiritually and then otherwise in every area of life as much as possible. And not that a woman can't initiate. Doesn't mean he always initiates. They can both initiate in the relationship. It's a constant, initiation on both parts. But he does generally lead. The responsibility to lead is resting upon his shoulders. And so part of leading is spiritually leading. So God spoke to the man out of his relationship and said, you're supposed to provide that spiritual leadership and guidance and direction for your family. But obviously somewhere along the line, the woman is now taking direction from another source. And that's where things always start to go wrong.
Okay.
She's taking counsel from another source who's got an evil intent. She's too naive to even know it at this point.
Yeah.
So she takes counsel, she's deceived, and she now disobeys God. And he lies to her. She believes the lie. She begins to fantasize. And this is where women struggle, that their imagination is powerful because a woman can imagine the future like no one else. Because she can dream. Okay. She sees possibilities. They are more intuitively real to her. Okay. And when she sees them, relationally speaking, because her emotion bonds and connects in the synapses of her brain and makes that even more powerful. She can feel the dream. She can feel the future, not just see it.
Yeah.
She can feel it.
Okay.
And she experiences it before it actually happens for a woman. And that's a very contagious aspect of a woman. So the enemy knew this.
Okay.
And so what he does is he says, now let me use this to give you fantasy.
So he actually uses what God gave her in that and uses it against her.
So now there's fantasy. And that's why women today, if you notice, fantasy novels are the number one selling novels for women. All the fantasy novels, all the fantasy movies, that's what is programming the woman's minds and appetite for what a relationship could look like. Fair enough?
My goodness, yeah.
So here comes, and I'm not saying they're all bad, I'm just saying we understand what God put in a woman. We want to celebrate women.
Yeah.
We want to honor women. We want to cherish them and respect them and love them and value them and find out what God has really placed in them. And this is a beautiful journey for a man that actually loves that woman.
Yeah.
He wants to understand these things.
But it's recognizing that there's an enemy that's using this beautiful thing about her to use it against her.
And so he said, used fantasy, and then she began to imagine, and she fantasized, oh, I can become wise with this thing, eating this fruit. Oh, this is a different intention that God had. So she believes the lie. She begins to fantasize of what's possible that she doesn't have. And she begins to focus on the one thing that they don't have versus everything they do have.
Isn't that always our problem? We could have the whole world, but we're focused on the one thing that's not there.
Yeah, and you look in the relationship, like maybe I'm missing out on this and I'm unhappy, and she forgets everything that was there for her. And now she eats of the fruit and she sins. And what does she do? She goes to the man. Now the man's just sitting there, dopey, 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 right? And because man goes ahead and she just gives it to him and he eats it.
Well, he's in love with her.
He's in love with her. So, and this is another key thing about how men are made. But in reality, he eats of the fruit and now the fall occurs. Immediately, their eyes are opened and they recognize they're naked and they're ashamed. They're afraid and they're shameful. First thing that happens, they're afraid of God's presence, which they never used to be. They're naked and now they're ashamed.
Okay.
That begins the initiation of Adam not being able to see into her soul, understand her thoughts, understand her feelings, and now their oneness starts to have a bit of a disconnection.
So what we know is the fall of man, the sin of Adam and Eve. What you're saying, it actually affects their marriage relationship, and their ability to connect is immediately affected.
Absolutely. Not only that, a curse comes into place, which still is at play in relationships today.
A curse comes on them in addition to this breaking
to the
apart.
relationship. So marriages experience a curse. So marriage deals with the curse now. A curse steps into the marriage, and now all conflict between men and women on earth today originates from that curse that took place in the garden.
Oh my gosh, so you're telling us that we have a problem with the curse in our relationships.
That's right.
Well, I really want to get into this, but I think we're going to keep this for another episode to find out, how the curse is affecting our relationships and how do we deal with that?
Absolutely.
Well, this has really been great, and I know that our audience is learning a lot from this, and we'll be back next episode learning about the curse in marriage.
Can't wait.